It began with a silence that wasn't just quiet, it echoed. At 6:44 a.m., Vatican bells rang like every other morning. But what followed wasn't ordinary. The guards, the aides, the secretaries, they all paused at the Apostolic Palace. Corridor was still lit, but no one was speaking. Something had happened behind the bronze doors. The man at the center of it was Cardinal Luis Tagle, once called the Asian Francis, once whispered as the likely future pope. His name was gone from every Vatican schedule. No public statement, no farewell mass. It's not even a formal decree. Just a quiet reassignment. Cloaked as an honor, Pope Leo XIV, the newly elected pontiff, the man who vowed unity on May 18th before 200,000 souls, just done something no one expected. He had personally approved the removal of Cardinal Tagle from the heart of Vatican power to a titular bishopric once held by himself. Was it a promotion or a veiled exile? The Vatican called it symbolic. The media called it ceremonial. But inside the Roman Curia, it was being whispered. This is the beginning of a reshuffle, a purge. Sources close to the Domus Sanctae Marthae say Pope Leo had grown unsettled by Tagle's rising influence, that his name was spoken too often in conclave speculation, that too many cardinals still saw him as the next chosen one. And so, without warning, the Pope handed him Albano, not a scandal, not a demotion, but not power either, just distance. Watch the periphery, one former aide said.
What?
Pope doesn't fight directly, he rearranges the chessboard. And just like that, Cardinal Tagle, once head of evangelization, was now bishop in name. But absent in strategy, the shock wasn't in the paperwork. The shock was, he wasn't consulted. Not a single senior Asian cardinal, not a meeting, not a warning, just a quiet signature. And still, Tagle said nothing. No press release, no public address, only a bowed head at Albano, hands folded, eyes lifted toward heaven. But behind that silence, some say something was building, because what if this wasn't the end? What if the man they tried to quietly move away was being prepared by God for something bigger? The rumors haven't stopped. Tagle was removed for a reason. Leo XIV fears him. Something happened in the Sistine Chapel no one will talk about. A file, a letter, a prophecy. Was there a moment during conclave, during prayer, when Leo XIV received a message he couldn't ignore? A vision? A warning? I don't know. But one thing is clear. Tagle was not removed for failure. He was removed for significance. And now, in the shadows of Albano, the man once prophesied to wear white waits not in defiance, but in faith. Because sometimes, exile is preparation. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than bells. This was the moment, the shocking moment, when Pope Leo XIV removed Cardinal Tagle from the Vatican. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't removing a rival, he was triggering destiny. You decide, asterisk. And yet, what if the removal of Cardinal Tagle wasn't merely political, but prophetic? It's because deep within the marble walls of the Vatican, beyond the applause and incense, something unseen was moving. They called it an ordinary reassignment. But no true Catholic believes anything in the Vatican is ever ordinary. There were whispers, not just from journalists, but from priests, from bishops, from those who still believe the papacy is not a throne of men, but a throne of divine fire. Some say, on the night before the announcement, Pope Leo XIV did not sleep, that he remained in prayer until dawn, that he stared unmoving, a sealed letter left inside the papal apartment, a letter written decades ago by St. John Paul II, and in it a warning about one who would rise from the east, carrying the heart of a lamb, but marked for trial and separation. He will be loved, it said, but he must be hidden. And the next day, Pope Leo XIV signed the document that sent Tagle away. Was it obedience or fear? Was it a decision made in secret or commanded from above? Because the church is not just a place. It is a battlefield. The bride of Christ is under siege, not only from the outside. But from within, inside the Vatican, two camps. One cries out for the return of truth, its tradition and triumph. The other, cloaked in diplomacy, smiles, while preparing the world for a church without Christ as king. And Tagle stood in between, too pure for one side, too holy to be controlled by the other, and that made him dangerous, because heaven does not choose leaders by vote. It chooses them by sacrifice and the blood of saints. Always speaks louder than ballots. There were reports unconfirmed, but chilling, that a vision was seen in the garden of the Pontifical Academy. A child appeared, robed in white, holding a golden key, and she said, "He is not removed. He is hidden." For a time, then vanished. Cardinals who heard the story wept, but said nothing, because they know there is a storm coming, a storm that will not just test doctrine, but the very soul of the church. And in that hour, men like Tagle, silenced, sidelined, scorned, will rise with the authority of heaven, because God always hides his warriors before the battle. And this is no ordinary war. This is the purification of the bride. This is the unveiling of the great war between light and darkness, between the Lamb and the serpent, between the true pope and the false prophet. And deep down, we know it. The Vatican is trembling, not because of politics, but because the veil is starting to tear. And when that veil is fully lifted, the world will see what the saints have seen for years, that behind the incense and Latin hymns lies a war for the soul of humanity. And those who are removed today may soon stand in the center of God's wrath and glory. Albano. It's not a punishment. It is a hiding place. Like Elijah in the cave. It's like John in Patmos. Like Peter before Rome. So watch carefully. Because the moment the world stops watching is when God moves. This is not over. This is the beginning of something the church has feared and long awaited. The sifting, the cleansing, the great fire of purification in Cardinal Tagle. Whether he speaks or stays silent, it's become a sign. Signal that heaven has begun rearranging the board. Not for politics, but for judgment. And what comes next will shake every nation, every bishopric, every soul who calls themselves Catholic. Because when God removes, he always restores. And when he hides, it is only to reveal in glory. More is coming. And the bride of Christ must be ready. Asterisk, and now. The world feels quieter, but in Rome, in the hidden chambers of the Vatican, there is no silence. Because every removal, every reshuffling, every public promotion that feels like exile is part of something far greater than most can comprehend. This is not just about Cardinal Tagle. This is about the future of the Catholic Church itself. A church that stands on the edge of its greatest storm since the crucifixion. Pope Leo XIV. A man of calm demeanor, gentle words, but eyes that see something most of us do not. Some say he has been visited. By whom? They won't say. But ever since that closed-door meeting with three cardinals known for their loyalty to an ancient order within the church, something in him changed. Not in public, but behind the throne. He became more urgent, more exact, more silent. And then the list began. Names, positions, regions, and one by one, men were reassigned. Not all at once. Subtly, Tagle was simply the most visible, the most beloved, the one whose absence would make the loudest spiritual impact. But why? Because he holds a key, not a literal one, but a prophetic key, to unity, to doctrine, to the East. And the East, my friends, is where prophecy points. Revelation speaks of it. Fatima whispered it. The ancient scrolls locked away beneath the apostolic library, they confirm it. That from the East would rise a servant with the smile of a child, and the fire of the apostles. But fire is dangerous, especially to those who live in the shadows, because deep in the heart of the Vatican, there are factions. Some cry fiat volantis, tua, let thy will be done. Others murmur, fiat volantis, Nostra. Let our will be done. And these factions, cloaked in titles, robes, diplomatic smiles, are not just debating liturgy. They are fighting for the soul of the church. Some want a universalist church open to all, obedient to none. Others still bow to the crucified king and fear only the judgment of heaven. And in the middle stood Tagle. He refused to bend. He refused to play their game. He chose prayer over power, humility over applause, silence over politics. And that, beloved, terrified them. Because the devil does not fear bishops in suits. Asterisk. He fears prophets in chains, so they removed him. But don't be fooled. This is not a defeat. This is a strategic move in a heavenly war. Because before the bride of Christ is crowned in glory, she must first walk through fire, a fire that will separate the proud from the pure, the false shepherds, from the true, the wolves, from the lambs. And when that moment comes, the ones cast aside will return with power, with authority, with flames on their tongues, just like Elijah, just like Peter, just like the apostles after Pentecost. You feel it, don't you? It's the trembling, the unrest, the signs in the sky, the confusion in doctrine, cries of the faithful growing louder every day. This is the shaking. This is the beginning. Asterisk. In Cardinal Tagle's removal was the trumpet blast, the signal that the curtain is lifting, and the final act has begun. Because before Christ returns in glory, the church must be cleansed, refined, purified, and that purification is not gentle, it is not soft, it is holy fire, a fire that will burn through heresy, compromise, and cowardice, until what remains is only the bride, radiant, faithful, and ready. So do not mourn this moment. Watch it, pray through it, because the hand of God is moving, and when he moves, kings fall, empires collapse, and the true servants rise. Cardinal Tagle has disappeared from the Vatican, but heaven has not forgotten him, because the greatest saints always walk alone before the resurrection, and the next move won't come from man. It will come from above. Asterisk, but what if? The greatest twist of all was never about Tagle being removed, but about what he saw before he left. Because just 3 days before the announcement, a private mass was held, not in the basilica, but in the hidden chapel beneath the Vatican gardens. Only 5 men attended, no press, no public. And at the center of the altar was not a relic. A sealed box. A box, said to have been retrieved from the archives of Pope Paul VI. Inside, a parchment one with markings that Vatican scholars still argue were not of human origin. The handwriting is unknown, the ink still wet, and it contained just 4 words. 4 words that would change everything. He must be concealed now. The moment Tagle read it, he knelt. He wept and said nothing, because he knew. This wasn't exile, this was prophecy unfolding. But here's the part no one dares say out loud. What if Pope Leo XIV didn't remove him out of fear, but out of obedience? Obedience to something even he couldn't fully explain? Gas. Days later, Leo XIV was seen entering the Red Room alone. And when he emerged, his eyes were different. Not tired, not shaken, but marked. Marked. As if something had been revealed. And just like that, the Vatican's course shifted. One by one, cardinals, who once held keys to power, were silenced, missions canceled, appointments reversed, plans vanished. Even the Secretariat of State, long untouchable, was ordered to restructure in silence. Why? Because something is coming. Something the faithful have long whispered in secret. Rosaries. But now, it is at the door. The purification of the church is not a metaphor. It is a judgment. It's a cleansing fire that will begin from the altar itself, and when it begins, titles will mean nothing. Only truth will survive. The bride of Christ, once torn by scandal, division, lukewarm shepherds, and spiritual blindness, will rise again. But not as she was. She will be holy. She will be blood-washed. She will be glorious, because the time of pretending is over. No more lukewarm bishops. No more political games. No more dressing corruption in cassocks and calling it diplomacy. The heavens have sent the warning, and the warning was this: when you see the faithful removed, when you see silence where once there was thunder, know this: heaven is rearranging the battlefield, because the final cry of the church will not come from Rome. It will come from the wilderness, from the Albano hills, from hidden shaps, from underground saints, and yes, from voices we tried to silence, voices like Cardinal Tagle's, voices like yours, because here's the twist no one saw coming. The man removed was sent out, but the one left behind wasn't the real pope anymore. Because when the bride is betrayed from within, heaven takes back the crown, and the real vicar of Christ is no longer seated in a palace. He walks the earth in silence, hidden, obscured, but carrying a fire so pure that when it is revealed, the world will fall to its knees. And that is why they removed him. Not to bury him, but to fulfill the final act, because prophecy has spoken, and soon hidden shepherd will rise, not to be pope, but to be the voice of judgment. The last trumpet, the sign of the Son of Man. So now you must ask yourself, not who sits on the throne, but who still carries the cross, because that is where the true power remains. And when the lightning strikes St. Peter's dome again, you will know time has come. Amen, and prepare.